Hi there. Welcome back to the Business of Story. If this is your first time here, I'm delighted you found us. I'm your host, Park Howell, and I've got just one question for you that we will explore in great detail on today's show, and that is, has the global pandemic and the health and economic havoc it's wreaked, does it have you reassessing what's important in your personal and professional life, maybe even redefining your personal brand story? Do you feel like you're in a raging river bouncing through it aimlessly in a raft? Or have you decided to take on the rapids with the finesse of a kayaker, doing your level best to navigate the whitewater, avoid the boulders, and not go over those friggin' waterfalls? Is it time to reinvent your career and redefine your story? Well, we'll cover that and more today on the Business of Story. But first, another story marketing moment tip just for you. As you were thinking about your story, I have one more question for you, and that is, who are you for? Who is your precisely targeted customer? And how do you help them? This is step 2 in the story cycle system. Last week, we talked about defining your number one position in the marketplace, what you do differently and more distinctively than your competition, so that you stand out. What do you stand for so that you stand out? So now, who is the hero at the center of your brand story? It's not you, and it's not your offering. It's your customer or audience. By the way, I use customer and audience interchangeably throughout my book, Brand Bewitchery, and in my online course, because all customers are an audience, and to me, all audiences are customers. Because really, aren't you trying to get either one of those two to buy into something you have to share, to offer, to sell? So here's what I want you to do. Get a pen and paper out and jot down your top 3 audiences. Prioritize them. You are not all things to all people, so just focus on your top 3 and who is your number one most important audience. I want you to absolutely fight that urge of saying, well, really, anybody can use my product or service. I get it. We all feel that. We all think that, but it's just not true. Who is that core audience that makes up 80% of your sales? Place them at the top of the list. Define their persona and then put it to the test. Here's what I want you to do. Rewrite your about page on your website, speaking directly to that audience. Place them at the center of your story so that they can really relate to who you are and why you do what you do. I want you to keep it to only 250 words and see what materializes before your very eyes as you just let this flow. That's the magic of storytelling. It has an energy all its own that will deliver the truth about your core offering and who you are for. When you've written it, send it to me, and I'll happily provide my thoughts. This has been an extremely powerful exercise for the folks that have taken advantage of my Build a Better Brand Story Sprint. It helps them clarify their stories and teaches them how to tell them. With the Story Sprint, you get a copy of Brand Bewitchery, access to our online course at businessofstory.thinkific.com, and 6 live sessions with me and 9 other fellow sprinters over the course of 3 weeks. Visit businessofstory.com for more information and to register for the next Brand Story Sprint, and start redefining your story to achieve epic growth. But what should you consider when redefining your place in the world, especially given these tumultuous times? Dr. Kevin Gazzara is here to help. He is the CEO of Magna Leadership Solutions, executive positive intelligence coach, professor at 5 universities, speaker, and author of the phenomenal book, The Leader of Oz. And the wisdom from his 4 decades of leadership experiences will help you navigate any circumstance, come hell or high water.
And you really have to be honest with yourself and just ask yourself, quite frankly, am I a raft or am I a kayak currently? And what do I want to be? You know, there's some people that are okay just being rafts. What I found, particularly in coaching executives, is none of the executives want to be a raft. And once they've kind of analyzed what they have been doing, they realize there's probably a little more rafting happening than kayaking. And it doesn't take a lot of energy. It does take some energy, and you have to be deliberate about it. And that's going to be the thing that makes the difference for you in your life and your career.
Kevin worked for 18 years at Intel Corporation in positions from program and product management to leadership development. He holds a BS in Commerce and Engineering, an MBA, and a doctorate of management in organizational leadership. At Magna Leadership Solutions, they are trusted advisors for executives who realize an investment in emerging leaders solves their growth and engagement challenges. So please welcome to the Business of Story, my good friend and former colleague at Arizona State University, Dr. Kevin Gazzara. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, Park.
You and I got a chance to meet, 2012 when we were putting together the curriculum for the Executive Masters for Sustainability Leadership program at Arizona State University, which both of us worked on and taught for about 5 years. And we've had, this grew a great relationship since then and have done a lot of work together. And I'm sorry it's taken me so long to get you here on the show, but I'm so glad you're with us today.
Saving the best for last, no doubt.
Oh, we're not last yet. Yeah, you're just kicking off the next chapter of the Business of Story. But really awesome to have you here. And so my question for our listeners today, Kevin, in our short time together, what is the problem we're going to solve for them today?
The problem that we're going to talk about is really about how do people kind of reinvent themselves and find happiness and success in their careers. And just looking at connecting different disparate things throughout their life can bring some really incredible insight. And, with COVID being here, I see it as a time of reinvention, and it kind of follows the story that I had originally written about in my first book, which was The Leader of Oz. And it's to draw a parallel here. It's kind of Dorothy coming back from Oz to Kansas and how she changed. And the real problem for us is, I think, how do we kind of look at where we are today, kind of listen to our younger self and get back to what we truly love to do, and be able to do that in a way that is sustainable and successful and, really builds, us as our brand and helping others.
Because, as you point out, we are really not in Kansas anymore, are we, Kevin?
We are not. Yeah, it's completely different today.
It's something that's interesting to me. I've promote and push the and button therefore narrative framework I learned from Dr. Randy Olson, and I have never seen it impact everybody in the world. And so I'm going to use this framework to set this up then. You may be like me, Kevin, where I was looking at 2020 with great promise and very eager to jump into the new decade and what it held for all of us. But the universe had a different story. It straddled all of us with COVID. Therefore, now we have to kind of reinvent ourselves. Even what we were doing pre-COVID, there's very few businesses that have been doing well throughout this. Everybody has had to pivot in one way, shape, or form. And I think in our worlds of consulting and coaching and solopreneurship, that pivot seems to be more expressed than ever. Would you agree with that?
I would agree 100%, and it's really about reframing and looking at the environment, as you had pointed out, Park, about the and button. Therefore, it's looking at the environment in a very, very different way. And as I teach in my leadership classes, you can always look at everything as an opportunity or as a threat. Although COVID really looks like a threat in almost just about every situation, you can pull opportunities out of that. And you have to choose where you're going to spend your energy and your focus. And if you spend your energy and your focus on combating the threat as opposed to extracting the opportunities, you waste a lot of energy, and quite often it's not going to lead you to a place of kind of happiness, engagement, and success.
Your encouragement then to listeners is to look back in your life at your younger self, the younger you, and re-examine your curiosities and what you were passionate about, and go and tap into that to see if maybe you can't redefine or refine your career and your trajectory leading into 2021 and beyond?
Well, we all go through stages in our lives where we have challenges. And I think we have that from a very early age all the way up through where we are currently. And if you go back, as you have pointed out, kind of your younger self, is to look at what challenges have you had in the past? How did you focus on them? And I think what you're going to find is that if you look at your success rate in the past, the challenges that you took upon as opportunities, that you are probably much more successful, much more happy, and really helped you advance yourself and your career more so than the amount of time that you might have spent or your energy just kind of trying to combat the threat or the situation. And if you use those, you can learn from those, and it can really help you today. And I think too often when I'm doing executive coaching, everyone looks at things, the executives quite often look at things as having something completely new and having to completely start it over and leave everything that they have in the past and not utilize that or kind of leverage that to help them move forward.
So let's take a look at your past. Let's get your backstory, because you have an interesting path to what you're doing today in coaching leaders around the world, and you teach at 5 different universities on leadership. But yours really came together at this intersection of science and music.
You know, I was born and raised in Levittown, Pennsylvania, and anyone that knows about Levittown, it was this cookie cutter environment that Levitt built back in the 50s after the World War II. So everything was somewhat homogenous. All the houses looked alike. Everything was equally spaced. You know, you had the everyone had the 2 children, the station wagon. I think it's 2.4 children exactly. The dog, and the mom stayed at home and took care of the household and the kids, and dad went off to work. So that was kind of the environment that I grew up in.
Like an industrial neighborhood complex, isn't it?
Exactly. And where the Levittown I grew up in Pennsylvania, there's several of them. There's one in New York, one in Pennsylvania, and one in Willingboro, New Jersey. The one I grew up in was about 10 miles away from Fairless Steel Plant. And that was the main reason that it was built there, because there was this big steel plant that needed workers. So it was very much a blue collar kind of environment. You know, my dad actually worked for the government. He worked for the Department of the Navy. My mom was a homemaker. I had great parents, always encouraging. They're always happy, love life, did lots and lots of things. Family was important. And I think the big thing that they always told me was that, and I believe this all through my life, I never even questioned it until probably my teenage years, was that anything anyone else can do, so can you. And I always believed that. So if I wanted, no matter what I wanted to be, I had very encouraging parents to allow me to do that. The next step, which is how did I take my 2 loves, which was music and engineering or technology, how did I kind of meld those together? As a kid, I took everything apart in the house. And my parents encouraged it. I don't know why. They just thought it was a good learning. I love to fix things. I love to teach others how to fix things. All my friends and my family, my sister, my cousins, they allowed me to do lots of things with lots of failures when I put things back together. Always parts left over. So radios, TVs, graduated to taking cars apart. And, my favorite saying to my dad was, even from a young age, "How it works, Dad?" And that was always my question. And my dad was very mechanical and always helped me and helped me learn. So at the age of 12, my cousin got a set of drums for his birthday. I remember going over to his home. It was this old set of 1940 Ludwigs, right? And if he would have kept them, it probably would have been worth tens of thousands of dollars today. And I just remember the very first time sitting behind them, just spending 3 hours and just pounding the living crap out of them. And on the ride home from my cousin's house, telling my parents is like, hey, that's what I want to do. I want to play the drums. And they always encouraged me to, once again, when anyone else can do, so can you. So they got me lessons and I started doing that. And all through junior high and high school, I played drums. I was a pretty good student in high school, not a great student, but I loved science. I loved music. I just loved just kind of life in general, discovering things, learning new things. I always had tons and tons of interests. Eventually those two kind of had to come together, and it came together on a defining moment.
And what was that defining moment?
So making the decisions in high school was, do I go to music school or do I go to engineering school or a technical school? And my parents said, you decide. I studied professionally all through high school. I used to take the train down into Philadelphia to study with a gentleman by the name of Paul Patterson. Paul was the recognized guru, best drummer in the city to study with. You had to go and audition for him. And fortunately, Paul took me on. And Paul was my mentor. He was a great coach. I really learned about the importance of coaching, of being a mentor for someone, to let them make their own decisions. And also, on top of that, being an amazing drummer. He taught me, and I went in Halloween morning of 1972 for my lesson. I took the train downtown and, walked the 15 blocks to the music store, Music City. I remember that, in Center City, Philadelphia, sitting in the studio waiting for Paul to come in. The phone rang in the studio, and I picked it up, and it was Paul's wife. And Paul's wife very, very calmly said, I still remember this, it's 50 years ago or so. Said, Paul won't be in today. He had a heart attack this morning and died.
Oh,
Now, Paul was 52 years old at the time, amazing player, just the love life, everything that he had done. So that was probably one of the very first deaths, other than my grandfather, that I had experience of someone very close. So I hung up the phone, I packed up my drumsticks and books, walked back to the train station, got on the train, went back, and I filled out all my applications for engineering school.
And that was it. So I guess it really showed how precious life is, a real wake-up call. And why do you think, Kevin, that steered you away from music and into engineering? Because you could have gone out and found another instructor.
Well, I was very much a pragmatist. And, one of the things that Paul said to me, which I really value to today, is that he said, Kevin, you could be successful doing this as a business. The decision is yours. And he knew my interest in things. He never pushed me in one direction or the other. He said, you have to make that decision. He says, I'll give you some level of confidence that if you decide to do this and you put your heart and soul into it, that you could be successful doing this. I have always been very much of a pragmatist, and I wanted all the other things that my parents had. I wanted a house, I wanted kids, I wanted stability. And what I recognized was my neighbor, who was also my mentor, was a very accomplished mechanical engineer. And he was somewhat of a mentor, and he gave me the same advice that Paul gave me, that you could do this if you decide to do that. So I had two competing environments. Both were very supportive. And I decided that I wanted to have the other things that came along with the engineering or the traditional business life that you may not have gotten, from that look that I got into Paul's life. Playing till 2:00 in the morning, sleeping 6 hours, coming in, teaching for 6 hours, grabbing a Subway sandwich, hopping in the car, packing up, and going to a gig, 50 miles away. And, it was rinse and repeat. What I had recognized was that I could do music on the weekends, which, I've continued to play ever since then. I could do music on the weekends to kind of feed that creative element, musical element. and I could do the other business technical stuff as well that would allow me to enjoy all of the other things that I wanted, that it wasn't an either or, it was an and.
Well, and I think that makes for an interesting conversation point right now, because you can look back to when you were a young man and you really loved music, you considered it, you then went into engineering, graduated, you spent 18 years at Intel, and you did a lot of different things at Intel at an executive level, then went on, studied leadership coaching, got your PhD in it, and have since been coaching leaders around the world. Now let's fast forward to today. So as we started with this show, you're talking about we are not in Kansas anymore. And what from your experience can you share with our audience for them to consider things that they may consider about their earlier selves that might help provide some direction if indeed they need some direction at this point, or maybe they've got a friend or a loved one that needs some direction. What would you tell them from your experience?
Park, let me tell you how I start when I'm doing the executive coaching or the career coaching for the people that I'm working with. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to work with lots of people. I have a couple recent college grads that I'm coaching, and I have a couple of C-suite and CEOs that I'm coaching as well. I think it all starts from the same place, is to really get them to talk about and think about what they love to do. I am a systems thinker. You know that, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. What is that? The circles, the system. See, I've blocked it out of my head.
The causal loop analysis.
Thank you. The causal loop. Now, folks, just so you know, Kevin taught me a ton about teaching. So I was brought into ASU to share the story cycle system in this executive master's program, and I had no idea what I was doing. And so I just put together my program as if I was teaching it, to a brand or a C-suite or whatever. And then Kevin spent probably 1 year, a painful year for him, I'm sure, where we would get together and he would help me sculpt out my curriculum. And the reason why that was important is we were teaching it side by side. He was teaching leadership. I was teaching communications. The beautiful thing was he has this book called The Leader of Oz, revealing the 101 secrets of marvelous leadership for the 21st century. And that was his textbook, among others, for his course. So as we were marrying my course to his course, I explained to Kevin, I said, you realize, using The Leader of Oz, you are following the hero's journey. And he's like, what? Let's talk a little bit more about that. So I educated him about the hero's journey, and I showed him how it worked with the story cycle system. And he says, this is marvelous because we can absolutely get in lockstep his teaching with how I talk about the story cycle system and the hero's journey, and literally lead our students on this journey. Well, and I learned again a ton about how do you teach this in person and online, until he rolled out the causal loops. And this is his engineering mind, folks. I still don't completely get it, but we taught it over and over and over again. And I was the D student as I was watching the other students go through it, listening from the side. But I digress. I know it works in the engineering field. It just doesn't work in this brain of mine.
Well, I think the value, Park, was it all comes from a great book that I had read back in the 90s called The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge. And I was so enthralled by it that I convinced Intel to get 4 of us trained by Peter to actually teach systems thinking at Intel. And then I've been doing that ever since I've left Intel with my firm, Magna Leadership Solutions, as well as bringing it into the poor ASU students that were subjected to it as well. But the whole concept and how this ties to the coaching piece is, I think everyone looks at things in compartments. We have our childhood compartment, we have our life compartment, we have our work compartment, we have our hobbies compartment. And what I've learned as a systems thinker is that all of those are completely interconnected. And you have to stop looking at them as separate silos and look at them as one big system. And once you've recognized that, is to look at the things that made you happy, engaged, excited, in all of the different compartments and look at them as a system, and then try to relate the things that got you excited to the work that you're doing or that you want to do. Let me give you an example, because I know right now we're a little bit in the abstract. So for me, I was a drummer, right? That was one of the things that I love to do, and I think, when I'm coaching, particularly a lot of the younger people about their careers and looking forward, they have this idea of, well, I'm a musician or I'm an artist, and that's what I want to do. In the coaching process, it's really to kind of pull out, what do you love about, what does that high that you get when you do these different things? For me as a drummer, like one of the things I love to do is I love to work with a small group, right? I love to work with a band. I loved being able to have some control, right? Even though as a drummer, you're driving a lot of the dynamics and so forth. I loved being able to have the control. I loved influencing others. I loved teaching people. I loved learning from them. I loved working with different people that had different knowledge, right? Guitarists, keyboard players like yourself, learning from them. I loved making people happy. I loved seeing that excitement I could create in the audience. And what I recognize is those are all the things that really fueled me. When I went back and did my systems thinking, in the total system, I also looked at, well, what are the things that I can do in the business world or in this other world outside of the entertainment world that would give me the same thing? Once you start thinking about the things outside of the context, the environment that you're in, like a music environment, once you start thinking beyond that, it can really help create some incredible clarity for you. Then you can start asking those same questions about, so in the business environment, what do I love about where I work? I can take exactly those things that I mentioned to you as a musician and say, does it make other people happy? Can I learn from people? Do I get a chance to work with small teams? How much control do I have? And you can use almost the same checklist that you knew inherently as a kid, right? Kind of looking back at your younger self, from the environment that was probably the most memorable for you, because you probably weren't thinking about, being a VP at 12 or 13 years old. But a lot of that stuff that you had then is really the same now. And if I can get people to really go back and evaluate that, they can make better decisions now instead of just making decisions of typically what I see with most people of making decisions around, is it more money and is it a bigger title and do I have more responsibility? And the real question is if you go back and look at the elements that really defined your happiness, your engagement, your success in the past, that list is probably pretty much the same today. But too often the executives just disregard that.
Yeah, because it's what you loved in the past. I mean, it's still inside of you. It's not like you really outgrow it. There may have been people in your life that really, cared for you and thought they were doing you a big favor when they were trying to steer you in a more quote unquote pragmatic direction. And yet that love is still inside of you. In your explanation, it reminded me of a scene. You and I had just been down at ASU and we had been working up to lunch hour. And I know I was trying to get back to the office and I was driving down University and this little scene just caught my attention. I looked over, I'm at a stoplight there, like University and 56th Street. And I look over and there's an office complex there and a guy is out. He's in a really nice suit, middle-aged man. He's got his phone to his ear. So he's obviously deep in conversation. And I see him walking on the edge of the planter box there and kind of balancing himself while he's on his phone talking. And you see him walking along, and it just struck me. So here was a 40-something, maybe early 50-something man, maybe doing a big deal right there as he's talking. But you could see the 12-year-old boy in him of just walking, putting one foot in front of the next with kind of that arm out to catch himself. And it was almost like he wasn't even thinking about it. It was these two worlds had come together and it just stopped me in my tracks. I remember when seeing that and thought to myself, we are still kids. We still have that curiosity and passion. It's just life has a way of beating us down or cloaking us in our suits and ties and now separating us by Zoom because of COVID and whatever. But how important it is to go back and look to see if those intersections, those interesting intersections, in your case, the love of music, the love of engineering, the love of working with people is showing up in your world today, in the work you're doing and the stories you're telling.
So, Park, I think you are exactly right. It's paying attention to the things that are subconscious, right? And looking at those and making sure that you're bringing those into your world. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to coach an executive who's making a difficult decision between staying with his current company or taking another opportunity. And my questioning went along the same lines of what we just talked about, is tell me about the current environment and the other environment. What does your gut say? So you want to go kind of with your sage brain. I want to know what it feels like in both places. And I want to know what you think it'll feel like in both places 5 years from now. What do you think it's going to feel like? So we move from kind of the emotional place, once that was established, to the rational place. And we talked about all the other things about opportunities and money and family and so forth. And I really walked him through what he already knew, just structuring it in a way that he could make sense out of it, because he was at the end, the ninth hour. Both companies were pushing him to make the decision, and he just couldn't bring all of the elements together. So I tried to kind of get him to take some deep breaths, to relax, to kind of clear his brain, and then just ask him once again of what does the future look like? Is that going to feed what you need? And what would your younger self say? What are the things that you love to do, and which organization gives you more of what you love to do and gives you that vision of where you could be? And once we got there, the decision was instantaneous. It was like, oh, of course I'm going to stay where I am. It's like, it's here, right? Everything is here. Although what I find over and over and over again, other companies have recognized his talent, have courted him, have dangled some really big dollars and nice titles to bring them into, moving from a organization that was 200 to 2,000, more opportunities, lots and lots of potential pluses. But if it doesn't feed what really makes you happy and engaged, that extra money that you're making, or that new title that you have on the fancy business card, really fades very, very quickly. And once you've made that jump, it's difficult to jump back.
This new program that you introduced me to a couple months ago, Positive Intelligence, I can't recommend it highly enough. I know you are now working on or maybe completely certified as a practitioner of positive intelligence. You sent it out. I started doing it in September, and I found it extraordinarily powerful. And then you put together a pod group of 5 of us, of really, 4 amazing leaders at the tops of their games, and what they are going through, and even wrestling with some of their inner demons and the saboteurs, as you learn about in the Positive Intelligence program, and how to quiet those saboteurs and fire up your sage, that inner voice that actually really knows what it's talking about, but we tend to doubt it. And I have found it to be an extraordinarily powerful program. Do you, real quickly, Kevin, would you talk a little bit about Positive Intelligence, what you're doing with that, and where people can learn more about it?
Sure. Well, thanks, Park. I'm glad that it made that impact on you and the other podmates. That was a great experience for me, and I'm glad to hear that it was as good of an experience for you as well.
Well, and it's worth saying here, folks, too, when you get a friend like Kevin in your life that begins as a colleague and then a mentor and becomes a friend, they open up amazing worlds to you. So going back to his music world, he got us in to see and meet Herbie Hancock out at the Mesa Conference Center, the Mesa Coliseum, what is it, Performing Arts Center, I guess, a couple years ago. And that blew me away to be able to sit and actually rap with Herbie Hancock. And in our current pod, we have moved on. Our friends, we still get together once a week now, and in that is Kenny Aronoff, the hardest hitting man in show business, one of the top 100 rock and roll drummers of all time. Had him on my show here on show number 277, and he's become a great friend, all because of Kevin and what he's doing in the world. So I just wanted to throw that out. Positive intelligence has a really profound impact on people.
Well, thanks for a little bit of the sales pitch there. I think you bring up one other important point that I think will be important for the listeners is, and something I've learned, Park, is that networking and sharing your network has really been a big element for my success with my consulting organization, Magna Leadership Solutions. But I think it has helped a lot of other organizations and people like yourself. Don't sell yourself short. The learning that I had with the business of story and the story cycle has really made a significant difference to me and to my business. But let me tell you a little bit. I'll give you the 90-second version of positive intelligence. Essentially, what it is it's a program that I got introduced to about 9 months ago through my business partner, Melissa Conforti. So there are 9 saboteurs and the judge. So it's essentially 10 saboteurs, and you have 5 sage powers. And it's understanding how they affect you and how you can spend your time listening to your sage, your gut, your inner self, more so than spending your time fighting your saboteurs. And you'll get that in the book. I'd encourage you to go to my site. It'll get you to be able to do the assessments. Their assessments are all free. To go to just www.pqtrainingandcoaching.com. They call positive intelligence, Shirzad Shamin calls it PQ, like IQ or EQ. Easy to understand, easy to implement. I'm finishing up my certification at the moment. We're going to run our next pod starting in January. I run them about every 6 weeks, like what Park had done. It's so rewarding to make a difference in people's life. Dr. Ron Bonsetter, I was on a podcast with him yesterday. I don't know if you were on that one or not, Park.
Nope, I wasn't there.
And Ron, who is the chief researcher for Target Training International, he didn't know I was on the call, and he said, I've taken 2 courses recently, and I took the positive intelligence course, and it's probably one of the only courses I've taken that's actually made a significant difference in my life. So it was a great promo. I'm going to have to see if I can get a soundbite from him on that.
It's super powerful. And I had Ron here. You introduced me to Ron, and he was on the show a couple of years ago talking about the work they're doing in brain scan and coaching and so forth. But I want to go back to this positive intelligence thing. Folks, if you're interested in it, here's 2 things that I did that really piqued my interest. So number 1, there's a great TED Talk out there about this, or go to the website of the guy that created this, and that is positiveintelligence.com. And I'm assuming they can get that through your site as well, Kevin. And what was your site again?
pqtrainingandcoaching.com.
pqtrainingandcoaching.com. Because folks, what you could do is take the free assessment and check out which saboteurs are showing up prominently in your life. And in some cases, one of mine, my top saboteur, big surprise, is high achiever. Now, the argument, and Kenny and I talk about this a lot because he's the uber high achiever. Now, on one hand, that services you in some cases to be able to accomplish what you want to do, but it can get too vocal, it can get too loud, and it can just ransack your life if you're not careful. And it can also lead to a lot of frustration and trouble. So you have to balance it and quiet it and bring in the sage to help you really manage that. There's the victim, and there's the what are some of the other ones here? The avoider, the restless, the controller. Anyway, so worth taking this. It takes about 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes to get through the assessment. But when you get that readout, you're going to look at that and you're going to might say, yeah, no way, that's not really me. Well, just show it to a loved one. And then it'll go, oh yeah, it totally nailed you. And it starts showing you these are the voices that you need to not work on, but work with. because you're not always going to silence them, but you do need to quiet them and rely on that sage, as Kevin was talking about earlier. And Kevin, I'll say I haven't done a lot of this kind of work, but I've done the typical other sorts of personality testing and whatever. I just found this to be easy and fascinating in how you pulled together the pod of us five executives that have now become great friends. So the course is long over, but we still meet every week on a Zoom session, and we have 1 or 2 Zoom happy hours a month too, just talking about what are we doing, in our life, and how is this affecting, how is it showing up, and how are we better equipped to not only control our own craziness, but to work with those around us as well.
Yeah, and I think the thing that people will find is take the assessment. It'll provide some great insight to you. You can also there's actually 2 assessments on the site. One is to get your saboteurs. The other one is to get your PQ score on 0 to 100 of how strong your positive intelligence brain is, that can kind of, I call it the air traffic control, can work between the saboteurs and the sage. And the book will give you some great insight. I think the difference is the course, the one that Park did with the other 4 podmates, gives you the tools on how to attack them, deal with them, and get better at it, as opposed to, it's one thing to understand something. It's a different thing to be able to actually act on it.
Yeah. That's so true. And the way I think of it, Kevin, is it's sort of like an EKG for your craziness. So what is driving you nuts out there and sucking your energy and your enthusiasm out of you, and you don't even realize it because these things are just running roughshod over you, these voices. And it's a way to you're not going to completely silence them, but you say, oh, there's that judge, or there's that avoider, or there's that victim showing up. You know what? Just be quiet, move over the corner. I'm going to go back to my sage brain and see if I can't just make a more rational and emotional decision. I mean, something that's really going to work for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I'd like to just kind of use a metaphor, Park, with you that I use with a lot of the people I do coaching with, as well as in the leadership programs that we do for lots of the companies. Is it's really about moving from, there's 2 types of people that we find in the world, that I find. There are the rafts and there are the kayaks. The people that throw themselves on a raft into the river, and they allow the river to take them wherever the current is going to take them. For much of the travels along the river, everything's probably fine. You're moving in the right direction and so forth. Maybe you hit a few rocks, or there's a waterfall that's coming up, or lots of rapids, and you just kind of have to deal with it. But it's as you pointed out, it's from a victim mentality. It's really, they're allowing the environment to dictate where they're going and how the experience has been. And then the other type of people, I call them the kayaks, right? They throw the kayak into the water, and the difference is they've got a paddle. They've got a vehicle that's more streamlined, and they can control to avoid the rocks, to avoid the waterfalls, to get them to the right place, to be able to get them to shore when they need to. But it takes a little bit of work to do that. And you really have to be honest with yourself and just ask yourself, quite frankly, am I a raft or am I a kayak currently? And what do I want to be? There's some people that are okay just being rafts. What I found, particularly in coaching executives, is none of the executives want to be a raft. And once they've kind of analyzed what they have been doing, they realize there's probably a little more rafting happening than kayaking. And it doesn't take a lot of energy. It does take some energy, and you have to be deliberate about it. And that's going to be the thing that makes the difference for you in your life and your career.
I love that analogy. Kayak, raft, or sometimes I find myself navigating those rapids in an inner tube that is quickly losing air. So we'll go to that level. Kevin, thank you so much for being here. We've got them going to your one website here for the PQ training and coaching.com. Anywhere else they can go or should go, and certainly check out his book on Amazon, A Leader of Oz. It's really, really a fun read.
Well, I would say it depends on who's listening. So if you're interested to really build yourself and your positive intelligence, which I think will work both in family, life, friends, and business. Please check out the positive intelligence through the PQ training and coaching.com. I spend most of my time, Park, as the senior partner at Magna Leadership Solutions, and we do leadership programs for companies all around the world. We've been doing that since I left Intel, in 2007 with my two other partners. And we have something that we've been delivering called the Leading Forward Academy. And we've been doing that for lots and lots of big companies, both U.S. and international. And if you're interested in that, you can find that through our main website, which is Magna, Magna Leadership, all one word, magnaleadership.com. What I would really encourage people to do is, I am a networker. I won't spam you. I won't sell you. Right. One of the things I've learned is help other people, and opportunities will show up. I'd encourage people to connect with me on LinkedIn. Looked at my LinkedIn yesterday, and my LinkedIn connectivity just hit 14,000 people. When I did an analysis of that, of the 14,000, I have close to 9,000 that are just in the C-suite. And that allows me to, through the articles that I publish, the books that I've done, in fact, we're getting ready to release a new book called Ready, Set, Get Hired. And it's really focusing on how do you use your network and how do you get opportunities, whether it's within a company or get clients if you're a consultancy. So if you're interested there, is connect with me on LinkedIn, Kevin Gazzara. We have a business page on Facebook, or follow me on Twitter. And my Twitter handle is Dr. Kevin, spelled out DoctorKevin.
Awesome. And where your new book coming out, Ready, Set, Get Hired, where can people get that? Will that be on Amazon as well?
That will be on Amazon. Let's see, today's date when we're recording this is the 11th of December. It's actually there. And I'm going to encourage the people listening. I don't know when this is going to get published, but I'm going to encourage the people listening not to buy it, only because we got it up and running and we're doing some reasonable edits to it. So the newer version will get uploaded realistically, I think, by the first of the year.
Well, then they by all means should go and get it. Yeah, this will be coming out late December, early January. So I encourage you to get it because Kevin's work is amazing. His insights are amazing, and he's just a good dude. I've seen him in action, and I just seen the impact that he has had on people around the world. And I just count you as I'm very lucky to have you as a good friend.
And that's mutual. Like I said, the business of story and how we frame our business has really made a big difference and really added towards to our success.
Awesome. Kevin, thank you so much for being here, and have a happy and healthy holiday out there in 2021 as well.
All right. And you too, Park, and to all the readers as well.
Absolutely. And thank you all for listening to this edition of The Business of Story. Share Kevin and his wisdom and insight with anybody you know by just pushing this link to this show along to friends, family, colleagues. By all means, check him out online. He is a wealth of information, and he freely shares it with the world. And I'm telling you, this PQ thing, this positive intelligence thing, is really super powerful. It doesn't take up that much time to do it, but it really gets you focused on what's happening between your ears. Those good voices and those not so good voices. And those voices aren't going to disappear. It's which one do you choose to pay attention to, and how do you manage them in the process? So check it out. Very, very worth it. If I can be of service to you, check me out over at businessofstory.com. I've got another Build a Better Brand Story Sprint starting in January. If you're interested in that, again, head over to the website. You can click right into it. We only have a few seats left for that one. We hold it down to just 10 executives as we go through them so that I can really work very personally with the group, and then on the one-on-ones afterwards. 3 weeks, 6 live sessions. You have access to the Business of Story online course, as well as my book, Brand Bewitchery, plus some other worksheets that you can't get outside of the Build a Better Brand Story Sprint. So check it out. We'll be having some more sporadically throughout 2021. Remember to join us next Monday when we're going to have another amazing story artist here like Kevin. And until then, you know that the most potent story you'll ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thanks so much for listening.